Hey everybody, it's Aaron from Historic Maritime again. I wanted to take some time and introduce you all to our crew. Some people are board members and some people are just going to be helping us out on our project through Reliance and the rest of the projects as we take them on in the future. You're going to hear from our lead shipwright and project manager, Kent Gorham. You're going to hear from Meredith Anderson, our engineer, David Sugarman, our electrician, and that's pretty much it. It'll be pretty short and sweet today, but let's get right into it. We're going to start with Kent.
All right, hi guys, I'm Kent.
So Kent is our lead shipwright for our organization, and he's going to be helping us in a real big way in Reliance. So, Kent, tell me about what your experience is. How did you get to being a shipwright where you are today?
I started on tall ships, and after the recession, there just wasn't much sailing in the winter, so I started doing maintenance, and I got tired of painting, so I started doing caulking, and just kept bothering more and more shipwrights, and eventually got to the point where I was planking and framing, and now I do most parts of the boat.
And we just had some caulking work on Reliance. We just did a
Indeed.
few, probably about 2 months ago now, close
Yeah.
to a month ago maybe. And when we talk about Reliance, most people know the boat. We've already kind of gone through and talked to people about the projects that we're going to be working on, but some of the big ones that you're going to be leading is the rub rail, the forward house removal,
Yep.
the aft house removal potentially, and I think that probably takes care of most of the woodwork. Oh, we got some planks to redo.
And a few planks, yeah.
So, what are you looking forward to? What are you most excited about to work on with Reliance?
I mean, putting the new rub rail on should be pretty fun, but the technical challenge of taking the sag out of the deck by the deck house. I actually find that fairly interesting concept.
Yeah, well, we're gonna try and do. I think the way that we're gonna do it is probably more conventional than most people think it is, but it'll probably be. I actually am looking forward to that too. It'll be pretty interesting.
Yeah.
So, what are you working on now?
So yeah, with the Virginia 5, when we had her out 2 years ago, we found there was a fair amount of rot in the sponsons. So we're coming back to address that. We have some of the sponson off on both sides. A handful of planks, handful of more planks because the Coast Guard wanted it, and
You got to keep them happy.
yep, and then some of the sill and studs for the house because the rot spreads.
Yep.
Always.
As we've come to know on many of these wood boats, and um, Kent, we sort of sought out when we were looking for a shipwright. We sought out someone who worked with big timber often. There's a lot of shipwrights out there that are familiar with working on yachts and things like that, but when it comes to big timber workboats, there probably aren't a lot of people that we could have the pickings from.
It's a never shrinking number.
That's true. So Kent's going to be with us all the way through. He's on our advisory board, so he's a major key part in this organization, and we're looking forward to having him and seeing everything else that we can throw at him along the way.
Indeed, that'll be fun.
Thanks, Kent.
Hey guys, I'm Meredith.
So, as most of you know now, that Meredith is our chief engineer on our organization, and so Meredith, tell me a little bit about what was your start when you started becoming an engineer. What got you to that place?
Well, it started real early and I got very lucky. We had some family friends who had an auto shop in the Federal Way area, and randomly they invited me to come out during the week and said, "Hey, you want to come see what being an automotive mechanic is like?" And I didn't really know that I liked tearing things apart until I went there. And then before I knew it, it turned into a job.
Well, that's nice. So, and then how did you make that transition from working on cars in the auto shop to the marine world?
So I started working in the auto shop at like 12. I was kind of working under the table doing brakes and oil changes. And the owner's son was part of the Sea Scouts. And I
Oh,
wasn't old enough to join the Sea Scouts. You had to be 14. But when I became old enough, we went to the Maritime Festival and I joined. Once I saw what a real engine room and telegraph setup was like, I was hooked. And I had never really worked with diesel, and so diesel sucked me in right away. And so the Sea Scouts really is kind of what pushed me towards working in the profession, the maritime profession, because I didn't even know those kinds of jobs existed. I had no idea what I really wanted to do until I started tinkering with stuff.
And so you finished Sea Scouts, and then you went to school, didn't you?
Yeah.
Where'd you go to school at?
I went to Massachusetts Maritime Academy, and then I came home and I went to Central and did something completely opposite. So,
and so once you finished with the Maritime Academy, did you have a chance to work on anything occupational, like for an employment, like that was crazy big, or what was like the biggest thing you worked on?
I got to work on like Horizon Line ships, so
Oh, okay.
they're an average of 550-ish feet. I also got to work on a couple steamers, so steam turbine, and they carried a bunch of random goods, just pretty much anything that would fit in the hold.
Right.
And that was high pressure, superheated steam. Um, and then I kind of bounced around and worked on different, tall ships. I got to work on Eagle a little bit, which is the Coast Guard Academy's training ship, and like I wanted to come home to Washington. Because of my health, I couldn't continue on the big ships. So I started transitioning into kind of tall ships and smaller stuff. And somebody eventually was like, you should start your own business. And so I did.
Well, a blessing and or a curse. So you did all that, and now you're helping us with Reliance. And so you've kind of found a love in working on old historic boats, it sounds like.
Yeah, I've always, since the beginning, every maritime festival, I got to go to both tall ships festivals that were in Tacoma. And we saw everything from 100-plus-year-old ships and engines to relatively recent. And the 100-year-old engines, the same technology that we see even in the brand new stuff, but it takes a lot of skill and creativity to be able to repair. There's no replacement. So you're making all the parts by hand. You're trying to figure out exactly what's wrong so you can fix it. And that is far more interesting than like plugging in a scanner and just slapping a part on it.
Well, it probably takes quite a bit more skill.
It does, and I was very lucky. I met the right people along the way. There were a whole group of guys who had been doing it for years and years who were not afraid of a young person, male or female. They just they were happy that a young person wanted to learn, and I soaked up as much as I could. Unfortunately, a few of those people are gone, but they're not all gone. So.
Well, we need more people to learn about this stuff. I mean, there's definitely a shortage.
It is, yeah.
As we've talked about, young, people, or even maybe not even has to be young people, but some of the engines that we've looked at together on boats that we've considered, just we've talked about over and over again. Like, you're probably one of the only ones in the area that can do work on some of these things. And
probably. I don't know anyone off the top of my head, at least in the Olympia area. I know there's people around Puget Sound who have far more experience than I do. But there's not a lot of people, even with the more modern engines. It's more than just plugging it in. And so I'm very lucky to have kind of been in that transitional period where most of the engines we were working with were mechanical. And then most of what I do now is all mechanical. And the average tech today that's like younger than me has no idea where to start with something mechanical.
So when you say mechanical versus what, for the people that are viewing?
So a mechanical engine is something that literally uses like mechanical linkages, gears, belts, that sort of thing, to control different aspects of the engine. So the injectors are fired mechanically via a rocker assembly. Modern cars and off-road equipment like excavators and that sort of thing,
and some boats,
because of emissions, they've had to transition into electronically controlled engines. So the pistons and the cylinder head and that sort of thing are all the same. However, there's a computer with preset parameters that says, okay, injector, you're going to fire right now. And it fires. It's more accurate. It's not, when you're doing a mechanical engine, you're essentially doing it by hear and feel. Like, okay, does it sound good? Is the smoke clear? Okay, we've got fuel and air adjusted correctly. And that's similar to like a steam engine. We would do that in the boiler, adjust fuel and air literally with valves, and look in a mirror up the stack, like, is my smoke clear?
Yeah.
Whereas now a computer does all that, and if it falls out of that parameter, that's where you get like a check engine code.
Yeah. Okay.
And if it's really out of a parameter, that it will go into limp mode. It will stop you.
Right. Versus an old engine, if it's really, really unhappy, catastrophic things can ensue.
Yeah, it's just gonna keep running until she blows. Like,
So you're helping us with Reliance. We're doing some mechanical work in that boat that we've talked about as a heat exchanger. We're doing a complete electrical overhaul. But ultimately, I think we're pretty happy with the way that the engine is at least running at its basic principle.
yeah, so I mean, the engine seems to run really smoothly. Like, she's got some issues that most of these engines have. One is the cooling system. Coolant wasn't changed on a regular basis like it was supposed to. So we're dealing with like corrosion aspects
Right.
that marine engines in particular deal with. And so we're hoping that it's not terrible and that we can flush it out. The setup with the radiator on top, I mean, that's similar to a locomotive. It works, but it doesn't work to the full capacity of what the engine can do. And so, that's why we're gonna go back to a heat exchanger. We've found a remote heat exchanger. We're cleaning it up, testing it, to make sure that will provide seawater cooling, which should be a lot more efficient.
Well, and hopefully, at least like we've discussed, once we cool the engine adequately, we'll be able to run it at its optimal temperature, or rather, we'll be able to run it at its optimal performance and keep it at an optimal temperature. Whereas right now, if we try and run it at the 1800 RPM that it wants to run at, she'll just melt.
Yeah,
and then, it'll
yeah.
overheat and cook on us.
And Detroit diesels, for those of you who don't know, Detroit diesels are two-stroke engines, and you may have heard the term "screaming demon." That is very true. They have a lot of top-end power for what they are. That's why the military likes them in rescue boats, and they can be rolled upside down and stay running. But the trick is they have to be run hard. They're very, very sooty engines. If you were to idle one overnight, say in like a semi truck, it would seize by morning. That's how sooty they are. So you really don't want to run these engines at slow speeds or slower speeds, because they'll just carbon up real bad.
Yeah.
They'll start slobbering, which is oil coming out of the exhaust, just dumping oil everywhere. They can have a whole host of issues if you don't run them hard. So part of fixing the cooling system is so we can run it at its rated RPM without it overheating. And try to keep this thing, they're very reliable. They're very simple engines. And so, I don't suspect any serious damage on like pistons or cylinders, anything. So I'm hoping the cooling system can be cleaned up enough that we can reach our running RPM.
Yeah.
And continue running the engine as long as we can, because like, they're simple and there's a following for them, so we can still get some support for it, which is great. We can't do that with all the older engines.
Well, and that's the thing is when we started looking at Reliance, we knew that we looked at everything on the boat. First of all, structurability is probably most important. But one of the checklist items for us is, is the boat structurally okay? And also, does it have a good engine that runs? And even beyond that, we looked out even a little bit further with Reliance, is not only do we have an engine that runs, we have a very reliable engine that runs, that there's still parts out there for within reason. But they're a super, super common engine. We could probably go buy 2 or 3 more for not much money, just to have on hand. Not that we're going to do that, but we could if we really wanted to. So what are you most excited about doing with the organization? Maybe not necessarily Reliance, but just with Historic Maritime in general.
Well, a huge aspect of it is restoring stuff. I've always wanted to have the capacity. That's kind of why I kind of shifted into the shop more, was to have the capacity to rebuild engines and machine things and weld things and literally fabricate kind of whatever we need to be able to get something up and running that maybe the average person couldn't. And I've found that that's like really satisfying. There's not many people who work on 100-year-old Atlases anymore, and that's like my favorite engine. So
I was just going to ask you, what was your, out of all the old time engines, you can't say steam, diesel only, what's your favorite engine?
either, well, I'd say an Atlas Imperial.
Yeah.
There's a 4-cylinder that I run down in Oregon. Some of you may have seen it on my Facebook. That came out of a tugboat as well, and they're really cool because you control each cylinder individually.
Mhm.
It's very hands-on. It's not like you just turn a key and it starts.
Well, no, it's quite the process.
Yeah. It's as close to steam as you can get. A lot
Yeah.
of things are exposed. You can see the push rods and the valves and the
Yep.
injectors. And they're very simple and super reliable.
Yeah.
So that's, I mean, getting to play with that stuff, nobody gets to do that really
Yeah.
anymore. And so, like, I'm very connected to old boats. I've always been connected to old boats, but I've never had the capacity like on my own to just restore an old boat all by myself. I don't have the money, I don't have the time, and I know that.
Yeah.
But I really enjoy getting to volunteer and work with different foundations that do that, because it's like, well, I get to use my skill set for something that I love doing.
Well, and it's something that we can put together for maybe a cause that's just not, it's not a selfish one. We can put forth a good effort to try and save something that's worth saving.
Yeah.
And maybe you guys might see us doing some work on an Atlas Imperial here in the next year or so. I'm not going to let any more beans out of the bag aside from that. But we can go ahead and release that we did get a heat exchanger.
Mm-hmm.
We have it in testing right now, and that means that they're going to pressure test it because, as Meredith has explained it to me, all these tubes going through the heat exchanger have to be tested to make sure that corrosion hasn't got to them and that the majority of the tubes are good. That way we can cool the engine adequately. We were able to get this heat exchanger for next to nothing aside from some blood, sweat, and effort. And so we're lucky, and hopefully it works out. If not, we'll handle that hurdle. But I personally am super excited to have you working on Reliance, and we've got a couple other projects that we've been talking about. So hopefully over the next year we are able to tackle those. But the boat's coming out here soon to handle the heat exchanger issue, and getting this thing running the way she was. She'll be quick.
Yeah.
She moves quickly when she's.
Yeah, that boat flies.
For a tugboat.
No matter if she won all the tugboat races.
That's right.
But the Detroit wants to be moving.
Yeah.
And I mean, the boat might fall apart around the Detroit, but it's good.
Yeah.
But yeah, like at this point, we're kind of in a holding pattern.
Yeah.
Waiting for an answer. We sent the heat exchanger off to Seattle Radiator. They're really great they test most of the heat exchangers that I send out. And they'll let us know like what it needs, how much it will cost, and flat out whether, okay, this thing's too far gone, or no, we can repair. A heat exchanger tube stack. This is an enclosed tube stack style heat exchanger that's a double pass. So water comes in one side, it crosses back and forth, and then it comes out the same side. And what they can do is, like, let's say a tube or a bundle of tubes have pinholes in them, they can patch up to 50%. If it was really bad and we absolutely couldn't get another heat exchanger, they're willing to patch up to half of the tubes for us. Does that affect efficiency? Absolutely.
Right.
We want as many tubes in operation as possible. However, if it came down to it, they could repair a tube for us. If it's really bad, luckily this is just a remote heat exchanger. It's not specific to the engine.
Right.
So we can always get a different heat exchanger for a different something else, like another application, because it's remotely mounted. So right now we're not super limited because we're not trying to find a Detroit heat exchanger. We're literally putting a remote setup.
Exactly. Well, so keep following along with us. We're going to talk to our electrician next. But right as Meredith said, right now we're kind of in a holding pattern. We're waiting for our heat exchanger to get tested for them to tell us it's good or bad, or if it needs to be repaired, how much it's going to cost, the cost of repair versus going out and buying a new one. We're also getting started on our electrical rewire. And so we're in a holding pattern with that as well because there's supplies we need and we have some stuff, but we're going to get started on it really, really shortly here, probably within the next week or two. And we'll be talking more about that with you guys. So this is your shop, right, Meredith?
Yeah, this is my
Big,
shop.
beautiful shop here in Olympia. Thanks for having us out and taking
Sure.
the time for us.
Yeah.
And we're excited.
Yeah, me
All
too.
right.
I'm
Awesome.
excited to see what happens.
Thanks.
So,
And last but certainly not least, this is our electrician, David.
Hi, everybody. My name is David. I'm an ABYC Master Technician with Sea Geeks, and I'm doing the electrical overhaul of Reliance.
So, David, how long have you been a marine electrician?
I've been doing marine electrical for about 4 years now. I got really inspired and started switching over to that from what I was doing previously over during COVID, and just kind of kept expanding my knowledge and experience from there.
You know, it seems to be a pretty common trend that people have made all these career transitions. Like when we were talking to Kent, I said, "What got you into shipwrighting?" And sailing kind of ran out on tall ships during the recession. You got into marine electrician stuff during COVID. So you're doing work on Reliance, and what specifically are you doing with us on Reliance?
We're gonna completely overhaul the electrical system. We're eliminating all of the 24-volt systems, going completely to 12-volt. We're doing the starter system with a brand new starter that has reduced energy needed to start the old Detroit 671 engine. We're gonna make sure that all of the wiring has fuses, because pretty much none of it has fuses right now. And we're going to make sure that the system is reliable, safe, and meets the needs for many, many, many years to come.
So the system that we're doing is probably one of the more simple systems that you've done in your experience. But what are some of the challenges that you face working on a 116-year-old boat?
So working on wood boats is definitely a little bit of a challenge. There's some other things to consider when you're dealing with corrosion. But in general, we want to make sure that we preserve the boat as much as possible. And so a lot of times mounting things can be a particular challenge, or working in the particular tight confines and not really being able to kind of create the access holes you might need to create in a modern boat that you can kind of touch with, refinishing the boat. Whereas, with a wooden boat, a lot of it is structural, and so you can't really make too many modifications, and you really have to work with what you're given. Now, with it being, a relatively simple system, there's not too many things that might require that attention, but it's definitely something to consider during every step of the process when evaluating a complete rewire for a boat that's old.
So, and what are you? So, 116-year-old boat. We're doing a complete rewire, right? We're talking about from everything, just not only just rewiring, but you already talked about this. We're converting everything from our 24-volt system starter to 12-volt. We're adding a little bit of newer technology. We're kind of bringing some of the electronics into the 21st century ish. We scored a radar at the fisherman's or the fisheries swap meet.
Yep.
And so we're on the hunt for probably a multifunctional display and a couple of other things. But what has your experience been before Reliance? What are you working on now?
So right now, I'm working on everything from 70-foot motor yachts that have 240-volt dual voltage inlets. That 4 of them around the boat. Putting in a very large isolation transformers. It's a small thing such as, hey, my shore power inlet burned up. I need to fix that to be safe. All sorts of things. I have a couple of my own personal boats that I'm working on other projects when it comes to things like cooling systems and adding in brand new electronics like a whole new multifunctional display and system with B&G is one of those as well.
Nice. So, and you're doing a big conversion on your boats. You're going to lithium, aren't you?
Yeah, I do a lot of
Nice.
lithium conversions. Definitely a specialty of mine. There's a lot of different factors to consider, and with the price of lithium batteries, it's very appealing to people because you can get lithium batteries cheaper than lead acid, AGM, and even gel batteries these days.
Yeah, nowadays it wasn't that way probably 3 or 4 years ago, but
Not at all.
it's definitely shifting in that direction.
Yeah, within the past 12 months, it really has. Yeah.
Yeah. So you've taken a look at Reliance. We're going to do a bunch of stuff on this boat. You've already been told our heat exchanger is good to go. Um, we're still waiting on several more things for our electrical project to get underway, but we've already kind of started. You got the starter pulled off, and we're getting ready to do that conversion here soon, at least for that. And then, one thing that we've talked about is the boat has to get hauled out for when we put the heat exchanger on. But a challenge that we decided to front David with is that, well, the cooling system on this boat, as we've talked about many times, is a radiator system, and the radiators have fans mounted on top that have to pull air up and through. But we need to temporarily wire that in safely to get the boat up to the haul out and then down to where the heat exchanger is going to get put in. And so David's been a great asset. We have a lot of good conversations about going back and forth on certain things. You've been a great help as far as, we don't have exactly the money to do everything to the highest dollar amount. We can't go to fisheries and buy the most expensive thing off of the shelf. But we've been able to get creative, and I think we're going to stay within code, within standard of everything.
Absolutely. Every standard is going to be met, and yeah, probably then some.
Yeah, for sure. That's probably sure. Safety is such a big thing for us. So, are you working on anything cool coming up, or are you looking forward to some projects with us that? Well, we got a couple more that we haven't told people about, but
we got a couple more things that are cooking that I'm excited that I'm not going to mention just yet. But you can always check out what I'm doing on my social media with Sea Geeks and our website. And always reach out directly if you ever have a question or need anything at all with your boat.
So, as we've gone through this, everybody's contact display for anything that you guys might need as well. You can reach out to these guys. We've got Kent's information, Meredith's, and David's. As we've decided to take this venture as a foundation, we've also wanted to be able to bring everyone along with us that provides good value and push them forward as well. The old adage is rising tide lifts all boats. And so if we can showcase everyone's great work on a couple of projects that we do, we hope that we can drum up some business for you.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thanks, David. I'm looking forward to this project, and I'm ready to get it going.
Yeah, let's get started.
All right. Thanks, guys.